When the first glass shattered, nobody looked at the old man. They were too busy laughing at the man in the thrift store suit with blood on his sleeve. Then the single dad pointed straight at the CEO and said, "You killed my wife, and tonight you're going to tell my daughter why." The room didn't go quiet right away. It got louder. A few men knew the piano actually chuckled like this was the best entertainment they'd had all quarter. One woman covered her smile behind a champagne flute. Security moved in from both sides. The violinist stopped mid-note. And at the center of it all, under a chandelier that probably cost more than Caleb Hart had made in 5 years, Damien Vale leaned back in his leather chair and looked at Caleb the way rich men look at suffering when they've paid long enough not to see it. Like it was messy. Like it didn't belong. If stories like this hit somewhere deep in you, subscribe, like the video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from before we go any further. Because what happened in that room didn't just break a powerful man. It exposed what power does when it forgets mercy, and what a father becomes when love is the only thing he has left. Caleb didn't belong there. Everyone could see that. His jacket was too small in the shoulders. His collar had gone soft from too many washings. His shoes were polished, but one sole was separating near the toe. In his left hand, he held a wrinkled envelope so tightly it had bent at the corners. In his right, he still had the parking ticket the valet had tried to throw back at him after seeing the rusted van outside with duct tape holding the mirror in place. Down in that van, parked where the club's golden awning lights couldn't quite reach, his 9-year-old daughter Ellie was waiting with a blanket around her shoulders and an oxygen tube under her nose. He had told her he'd only be 5 minutes. He had already been inside for 12. "Sir," one of the guards said, stepping closer, "you need to leave, now." Caleb didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on Damien. "You don't remember me," Caleb said, voice rough and shaking in all the wrong places. "That makes sense. Men like you never remember the people you bury." Damien smiled. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't confused. It was annoyed. "I have no idea who you are," he said, just loud enough for the room to hear. "And if this is some kind of stunt, you picked the wrong building." A few people laughed harder at that. Caleb nodded once, like he expected it. "Yeah," he said. "That's what your lawyers said when my wife tried to warn them." That changed something. Not enough to stop the guards, but enough to make a few faces turn. Damien's smile held for half a second too long. Then he set his glass down. "My wife's name was Mara Hart," Caleb said. "She worked on the 38th floor. Executive support. 7 years. She stayed late the night your company buried the trial results. She downloaded files. She called your father. She never made it home." A woman near the bar lowered her drink. One of the men at Damien's table shifted in his seat. Security grabbed Caleb's arm. And Caleb finally looked at them. "Take your hands off me," he snapped, sudden and sharp enough to make even the guards hesitate. "My daughter is downstairs fighting to breathe because your company priced her medicine like a luxury watch. So if you're going to throw me out, do it in front of everyone. Let them see exactly what they're paying to belong here." That landed. Not because they cared, because now they were curious. Curiosity is dangerous in rooms built on silence. Damien rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. "You're making a very serious accusation. And you're wearing a very expensive lie." One of the members barked out a surprised laugh, then stopped when Damien glanced his way. Caleb lifted the envelope. "Mara told me if anything ever happened to her, I should come here on Founders Night. She said not to go to the police first, not the press. Here. She said, find the oldest man in the room. He'll know what this means. A murmur moved through the club. Founders' Night. Every year, the board, the investors, the old families, and the hand-picked CEOs gathered in the Aurelian Club above Vale Tower, behind doors that required 2 scans and a recommendation from someone whose last name could open banks. They toasted longevity. They traded power. They congratulated themselves for surviving scandals the way sailors celebrate storms they caused. And in the far corner, beneath a portrait of the company's first laboratory, sat Leonard Vail, 91. Founder of Vail Biotherapeutics, Damien's father, the oldest man in the room. He had not spoken once all evening. Most people assumed he slept through these dinners now. He looked like the kind of man age had narrowed but not softened. Thin silver hair, sharp nose, pale hands resting on a cane polished by use, not ceremony. His hearing wasn't perfect. His back wasn't straight. But even seated, he had the kind of presence that made younger men sit better. Caleb turned toward him with the envelope in his hand. "Mr. Vail," he said, and his voice broke on the second word, because suddenly he wasn't angry anymore. He was desperate. "My daughter doesn't have much time. I wouldn't be here if I had anywhere else to go." Damien took one step forward. "Don't involve my father in this circus." Caleb ignored him and pulled a fountain pen from inside the envelope. It was black lacquer, gold cracked near the cap, old enough to belong to another century. When Caleb held it up, the overhead light caught the engraved initials, L.V. For the first time all night, Leonard Vail moved. Not a twitch, not a blink. He gripped the arms of his chair and slowly, painfully, rose to his feet. Everything stopped. No laughter, no violin, no ice clinking in glasses. Even security took their hands off Caleb. Leonard stared at the pen like he'd just seen a ghost cross the carpet. Then he looked at Caleb and asked, in a voice worn thin by years but still carrying command, "Where did you get that?" Caleb swallowed. "My wife, Mara Hart." Leonard's face changed so fast it was almost frightening. Not recognition first. Regret. Real, immediate, old regret. "She kept it," he whispered. Damien stepped in quickly. "Father, sit down. You're tired." Leonard didn't look at him. "How did you get that pen?" he asked again, louder. Caleb took a breath that shook on the way in. "Mara said you gave it to her the day she caught an error in one of your treatment reports. 10 years ago. She said it was the first time someone in that building told her she mattered." Leonard's mouth opened slightly. Around the room, people looked from the old man to Damien and back again. Caleb kept going. "She tried to call you 3 times the week she died. She emailed your private address. She left a package with reception. Then she got hit by a delivery truck 2 blocks from home. The police called it an accident. Your company called it tragic. And then your lawyers showed up before we even buried her." He took another step forward. "They offered me money to sign a silence agreement. They said it was compassion." Now the room wasn't just curious, it was uncomfortable. Damien's jaw tightened. "This is disgusting." "No," Caleb said quietly. "What's disgusting is that your medicine kept getting more expensive after the internal report said children were having dangerous side effects. What's disgusting is that my Ellie needs that medicine to stay alive. And the same company that buried my wife is now sending me collection notices because I can't afford the one thing keeping my daughter out of a hospital bed." Leonard lowered himself back into the chair slowly, but he didn't sit all the way. It was as if the weight of what he was hearing refused to let him rest. "Mara Hart," he said, almost to himself. Red hair, kept index cards in color order, hated elevators. Caleb blinked. Yes. Leonard closed his eyes. She brought me tea after my stroke because my own son forgot I couldn't hold hot coffee with my left hand. Damien snapped, "Father!" The old man finally turned to him. That one look drained the color from Damien's face. Not because it was loud, because it was cold. "Did you know," Leonard asked, "that Mara Hart tried to contact me before she died?" Damien didn't answer right away. And in powerful rooms, silence is sometimes worse than a confession. "She was a junior employee," Damien said at last. "Dozens of people tried to contact you directly. We filtered what mattered." Filtered what mattered. Caleb laughed once. It wasn't happy. It sounded like something inside him breaking in public. "My daughter's life was filtered. My wife's death was filtered. Is that what you call it?" One of the board members stood halfway from his chair. "Perhaps this conversation should happen privately." "No," Caleb said, spinning toward him. "Private is where men like you turn crimes into paperwork." That hit too close. Several eyes dropped. Caleb knelt and set the envelope on the nearest table. For a second, his hand lingered on it, almost tenderly. "Mara knew she wouldn't get another chance," he said. "So she left me this. She told me not to open it unless Ellie needed saving." Damien's face flickered. Only a little, but Caleb saw it. That was the first moment he knew the envelope mattered. He pulled out a folded sheet, then another, then a small flash drive taped beneath the flap. The room inhaled. Damien moved fast. "Security!" Leonard slammed the base of his cane against the hardwood floor. Once. The sound cracked through the club like a gunshot. "No one touches him," the old man said. And just like that, the entire room obeyed the man they'd spent all evening pretending was finished. Caleb looked at Leonard, then at the papers in his hand. "These are copies," he said. "Internal emails, clinical summaries, payment transfers routed through a shell foundation called Billionaire Health Access." He swallowed. Mara wrote notes in the margins. Names, dates, people who knew. A woman from the far end of the table stepped closer. She had been quiet all night. Gray suit, sharp eyes, no smile. "I'm on the audit committee," she said. "May I see them?" Damien cut in. "Absolutely not." The woman didn't even look at him. She looked at Leonard, and Leonard said, "You may." That was when the room split. Not physically, morally. Some people stayed very still, hoping stillness would make them invisible to the truth. Others leaned in because power was shifting, and they wanted to be near the winning side before it had a name. The audit chair scanned the top sheet. Her expression hardened. "These transfer approvals are signed by executive office," she said. Damien laughed under his breath. "Do you know how easy it is to forge internal records?" Caleb took out one last piece from the envelope. A voice recorder. Old, cheap, scratched. "My wife stopped trusting paper," he said. "She started recording." He pressed play. For a second, all they heard was static. Then Mara's voice filled the room. Thin, tired, afraid, but unmistakably brave. "If you're hearing this," she said, "then either I found the courage to hand this to Leonard myself, or Damien found me first." Nobody moved. Caleb stared at the carpet, because if he looked up, he might not be able to stay standing. On the recording, A door shut somewhere in the background. Papers rustled. Mara whispered faster. The pediatric trial numbers were altered after Phase 3. Adverse events were removed from the final presentation. The Bellmere Fund isn't charity. It's the place they're moving money from denied claims and delayed reimbursements. Damien signed the authorizations. Legal knows enough to ask questions, but not enough to stop him. If anything happens to me, it wasn't random. Then her voice cracked. Caleb, if it comes to you hearing this, I'm sorry. Tell Ellie I kept the drawing she made of our kitchen, the one with too many sunflowers. Tell her I was thinking about that when I got scared. Caleb covered his mouth. For one impossible second, he wasn't in a private club full of predators. He was back in the apartment 3 years earlier, sitting on the bathroom floor after the funeral, listening to that same recording alone because he hadn't known whether playing it would save his family or destroy what was left of it. On the recorder, Mara kept going. Leonard, if this reaches you, I need you to know something worse. Damien isn't just hiding the data. He's using your signature authorization from the stroke months. Old documents, old passcodes. He said no one would ever question your name because your name built the building. The sound cut out. No dramatic ending. No music. Just silence. The kind that makes wealthy people realize they may actually be hearing consequences. Then Damien did the last thing he should have done. He smiled. Small, controlled, almost pitying. This proves nothing, he said. A dead woman makes an accusation and a widower shows up at a dinner? You think that overturns governance? Caleb looked up. You still talk like this is about governance. Damien spread his hands. What would you like me to say? That I'm sorry your wife was paranoid? That I'm sorry you're desperate? I am. But desperation makes people dangerous, especially when there's a sick child involved. Caleb went still. That was low even for him, and Damien knew it. I know about your daughter's file, Damien continued, voice smooth again. Eleanor Hart. Pulmonary fibrosis complication after infection. Very expensive maintenance course. Tragic. But if you think barging in here and making accusations will help her. You looked at her file? Caleb said. The question sounded soft, which made it more terrifying. Damien realized too late what he had admitted. Caleb took one step toward him. You looked at my little girl's file while I was begging your billing department for 1 more month. Caleb, Leonard said quietly. But Caleb was gone now. Not physically, emotionally. The fury had stripped him down to something raw. You knew her name, Caleb said. You knew exactly who she was while your people were sending letters stamped "Final Notice." Security started moving again. Not on orders this time, but instinct. Damien backed up half a step. The board members stood. Somebody whispered, Jesus. And then, from the doorway, a sound came that cut through all of it. A cough. Small. Wet. Wrong. Every head turned. Ellie stood there in oversized headphones and pink socks under her sneakers, one hand on the doorframe, the other clutching the blanket from the van. Her oxygen tube had slipped loose. Her face was pale. There was a little blood at the corner of her mouth. Caleb's entire body dropped out of fight mode and into fatherhood so fast it hurt to watch. Ellie? She tried to smile like she hadn't done anything bad. You said 5 minutes. Then she swayed. Caleb got to her before she hit the floor. The room that had laughed at him
now watched a father kneeling on polished wood, wiping blood from his daughter's lips with the same sleeve they had mocked 10 minutes earlier.
Ellie looked over his shoulder at the chandeliers, the suits, the gold-rimmed glasses, all of it too bright for how tired she was. "Is that him?" she whispered. Caleb nodded once. Her eyes moved to Damien. She studied him the way children study adults when they're trying to understand what kind of danger wears a smile. "You look normal," she said. No one in the club forgot that sentence, because monsters rarely look like monsters when they're winning. Caleb adjusted her oxygen. "You shouldn't be up here." "I got scared." She looked at Leonard, then back to Caleb. "And the man downstairs said rich people don't help unless they can see the crying." Several members looked away. The valet had said that. Maybe as a joke, maybe as truth. Ellie coughed again, harder this time, and Caleb pulled her close. For 1 second, the whole room disappeared, and he pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought you here." Ellie's fingers grabbed his collar. "Don't say sorry like that," she whispered back. "That's the voice you used when Mom died." The heartbreak of it was so naked, the room almost couldn't bear it. Leonard Vale sat down very slowly. Not because he was weak, because shame had finally found somewhere to land. "Bring a doctor," he said. Damien answered first. "No, we are not turning this into theater." Leonard looked at him with open disgust. "It became theater when you learned to clap for suffering." The audit chair was already dialing. "Medical is coming." Damien stepped closer to Leonard. His voice dropped, but not enough. "You think sacrificing me fixes this? If these papers go public, the stock collapses. The drug program collapses. Thousands of employees take the hit. You'll destroy the company to save one man's grief?" Caleb heard every word. So did Ellie. She lifted her head from Caleb's shoulder and stared at Damien with a child's exhausted clarity. "It's not one man's grief," she said. "It's our whole house." That should have been the moment Damien broke. It wasn't. Men like him don't break when truth arrives. They negotiate. He crouched, careful, polished, pretending tenderness. "Ellie, isn't it?" he said. "I can help you. Private care, immediate access, best specialists. Tonight. All your father has to do is hand over that envelope so the adults can sort out what's true and what isn't." Caleb froze. There it was. The impossible choice. Not theoretical anymore. Not moral philosophy from people with full refrigerators. His daughter needed treatment. That treatment existed. The man offering it might have destroyed his wife, but if Caleb said no, and Ellie got worse, what kind of father would that make him? He hated himself for how quickly the thought arrived. Ellie felt it. Kids always do. She looked up at him with that terrible wisdom sick children learn too young. "Dad," she whispered, "if he helps me because he's scared, he'll hurt someone else because he can." Caleb shut his eyes. "No," Damien said softly. "He'll save you because your father finally learned how the world works." Leonard's face hardened. And then Caleb made the choice he would remember for the rest of his life. He stood up with Ellie in his arms, turned away from Damien, and walked to Leonard Vale. When he stopped in front of the old man, his hands were shaking so hard Ellie's blanket trembled with them. "I came here to beg," Caleb said. "I hate that I did. I hate that he made me feel like my daughter's life was something I had to trade for silence." He set the envelope on Leonard's lap. "But if you were ever the man my wife believed you were, don't save us by burying her twice." Leonard stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked down at the envelope, at Mara's handwriting, at the pen he had given a junior employee because once, years earlier, She had quietly corrected a dosage note and spared him humiliation during the worst recovery of his life. He remembered her voice. He remembered promising her that good people kept institutions honest. And he remembered every year afterward when he let Damien take more control because it was easier than fighting his own blood. When Leonard finally spoke, his voice sounded ancient. "This is my fault too." Nobody expected that. Not Caleb, not Damien, not even the board. Leonard gripped his cane. "I knew my son lacked mercy. I told myself ambition can mature into wisdom. I told myself the company was safer in family hands than in strangers' hands. Every time someone warned me he cut corners, I demanded proof instead of courage." He looked up at Caleb. "Your wife came to the right man. Too late." Damien's face twisted. "Father, enough." "No," Leonard said. "Enough was 3 years ago." He turned to the board. "Call corporate counsel, external counsel, not ours. Freeze every Bellmere transfer, lock executive access. And before any of you think about protecting the market over the truth, remember this. The market recovers. Character does not." Damien laughed then, sharp and unbelieving. "You sanctimonious old fool. You think they'll choose you over me? Over stability? Over revenue?" The audit chair answered before anyone else could. "They're not choosing him," she said. "They're choosing prison or not prison." That's when the room really turned on Damien. People started checking phones, whispering names, asking assistants for documents. One man moved away from Damien so obviously it was almost comic. Another tried to slip out and was stopped by security, who no longer seemed sure whose orders mattered. But Damien still had one weapon left, the personal one. He looked at Caleb and smiled with absolute cruelty. "When this goes public," he said, "your daughter's name will be in every article. Your wife's death, your debts, your apartment. People will dissect your pain for clicks. You think truth is noble? Truth is hungry. It eats the weak first." Caleb felt that hit, because he knew it could be true. Ellie curled into him, tired beyond words. Then Leonard rose again, though this time it looked like it hurt him all the way down his spine. "Then let it eat me first," he said. The room stilled. Leonard turned to one of his assistants. "Prepare a statement. I will sign it tonight. Full admission of governance failure. My name, my oversight, my negligence. And establish an independent victims' trust funded by my voting shares and personal estate, effective immediately." Damien stared at him as if he'd been struck. "You disinherit your own family?" Leonard's eyes went glassy, but not from weakness. "Family?" he said. "My son. Family is the people whose names keep you awake when you fail them, not the ones who share your chin." For the first time that night, Damien had nothing clever to say. A doctor arrived with 2 nurses. Ellie was moved to a sofa. Oxygen adjusted, vitals checked. Caleb hovered so close he nearly collapsed when one nurse told him gently to breathe himself. The board had become a storm around them. Calls, orders, legal language, panic dressed as professionalism. And in the middle of it, Leonard Vale asked to speak to Ellie. Caleb hesitated. Ellie nodded. The old man lowered himself beside her. Up close, he looked less like power and more like time. Thin skin, tired eyes, a hand that trembled only when it was at rest. "I can't give you back your mother," he said. Ellie watched him carefully.
No, she said. I can't give your father back the years he lost. No, but I can make sure the men who counted on silence learn what it costs. Ellie glanced at Caleb, then back at Leonard. My mom used to say sorry means you do something after. A sound escaped Leonard then. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Yes, he said. Your mother was right. By midnight, Damien Vale was escorted out of his own club through the service elevator so the press gathering below wouldn't get the clean shot he wanted to avoid. Too late.
One kitchen worker filmed it anyway. The video hit the internet before the ambulance carrying Ellie reached St. Catherine's. A CEO with his tie loosened, jaw tight, refusing to answer questions, while employees stared from the corridor, and a dishwasher in rubber gloves muttered, "Don't laugh now." That clip would be everywhere by morning. But the part nobody outside that room saw, the part Caleb carried forever, was smaller. It was Leonard Vale, alone for a moment beside the portrait wall after the chaos, holding Mara's fountain pen in both hands like a relic he did not deserve. Caleb had nearly walked past him. Then Leonard said, without turning, "She was braver than I ever rewarded." Caleb stopped. "You don't get to make her noble just because you failed her," he said. Leonard nodded. "I know." That answer made Caleb angrier than excuses would have. Because real remorse gives you nothing easy to fight. At the hospital, Ellie was stabilized before dawn. Not magically, not permanently. Just enough. Enough for another week, maybe 2 if the specialist plan moved fast and the trust did what it was promised to do. Caleb sat beside her bed in the blue-gray morning while rain tapped the window. And for the first time in years, no collector was calling. No billing portal was flashing red. No lawyer was asking for signatures under the word confidential. Ellie was asleep. Her hand was wrapped around Caleb's index finger. On the chair beside him sat a sealed letter, delivered by courier less than an hour earlier. From Leonard Vale. Inside was a handwritten note, crooked but steady. For Mara, too late. For Ellie, not too late enough. I have transferred emergency access approval for her treatment and signed the release of every document your wife tried to send me. If I die before this is finished, make sure they don't call me a good man. Call me a useful one, finally. Caleb read it twice. Then he folded it and put it beside Mara's old recorder. 3 months later, the Bellmere hearings were public. Families testified, former employees talked, emails surfaced. Analysts called it one of the ugliest executive scandals of the decade. Damien tried to blame subordinates, then legal, then pressure, then market realities. It didn't work. Too many names, too many dates, too much blood hidden under polished language. And every time the cameras found Caleb leaving the courthouse, he said the same thing. My wife told the truth when it was dangerous. I'm just late. People remembered that. But they remembered something else more. The image of a poor single dad walking into a room designed to make men like him feel small, and refusing to shrink. They laughed when he entered. They stopped when the oldest man in the room stood up, and they never laughed again after they saw why. A year later, Ellie drew a new picture, not of their old kitchen, not of hospital machines. She drew a giant room with chandeliers, tiny men in black suits, one furious little girl in pink socks, and an old man standing with a cane like a sword. At the center, She drew her dad bigger than all of them. When Caleb asked why, Ellie shrugged and said, "Because that's how it felt." And maybe that was the real ending. Not the scandal, not the headlines, not even the arrests. Just this. A little girl who had watched the world try to price her life, and a father who walked into the lion's den with nothing but love, grief, and the truth his wife died protecting. Some people inherit money, some inherit power, and some inherit a moment when standing up costs everything, but sitting down costs your soul. Caleb Hart walked in poor that night. He walked out carrying something richer than any man in that club could buy back once it was gone. His name, his daughter's future, and the truth.